He hit the pavement hard, vision blurring, heart misfiring, then a child's voice cut through the chaos. "She's poisoning you." Helena's outrage came too fast, too loud, too rehearsed. And Joaquin realized the only person who wasn't panicking was the little girl who had nothing to gain by lying. If this story pulled you in, go ahead and subscribe so you never miss what's ahead. I've got another unforgettable story coming tomorrow. And while you're here, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing people tuned in from all over the world. Okay, let's get back into it. You're not dying. Your wife is spiking your food. The maid's daughter whispered to the Mafia boss as he collapsed at sunset. Joaquin Lozano's knees hit the pavement before he realized he was falling. One moment he'd been walking the coastal path overlooking the Pacific. Helena's arm looped through his, the evening breeze carrying salt and jasmine. The next, the world tilted violently sideways and the ground rushed up to meet him. He caught himself on his hands' tattooed knuckles, scraping against concrete, his black suit jacket pulling tight across his shoulders as he fought to stay upright. The tremor that had plagued him for months turned into a full-body shudder. "Joaquin!" Helena's voice cut through the roaring in his ears. Her hands gripped his shoulders, emerald silk rustling as she crouched beside him. "Someone help! Please!" But there was no one else on this stretch of path. Just palm trees swaying in the dusk, the mansions of Malibu perched like fortresses above the cliffs, and the ocean stretching endlessly westward. Joaquin's vision blurred. His chest heaved as he tried to draw breath, tried to understand why his body, which had survived bullet wounds and broken ribs and countless fights, was betraying him now. "I've got you," Helena murmured, stroking his hair. "Just breathe, darling. I'll call Dr. Morrison." "Mr. Lozano?" The small voice made them both freeze. Joaquin lifted his head, blinking against the golden light. A little girl stood 3 feet away, her mustard-yellow sweater bright against the darkening sky. She wore a plaid skirt and knee-high socks, one shoelace untied. Her dark hair was pulled into a long braid that hung over her shoulder. "Sophie," the maid's daughter. "Sophie!" Helena's tone sharpened. "What are you doing here? Where's your mother?" The girl didn't answer. She stepped closer, her brown eyes fixed on Joaquin with an intensity that seemed wrong for someone who should have been worried about homework and dolls. There was something old in that gaze, something knowing. "You look really sick," Sophie said quietly. Helena stood, positioning herself between them. "Sweetheart, Mr. Lozano just needs rest. You should go home, your mama will be worried." "It's getting worse, isn't it?" Sophie interrupted, still looking past Helena at Joaquin. "You could barely walk yesterday. Today you can't even stand." Joaquin's heart hammered against his ribs. How long had this child been watching? What had she seen? Helena's smile was tight, controlled. "Sophie, this isn't appropriate. Mr. Lozano is receiving medical care from very expensive doctors. You need to go. They don't know what's wrong with him." Sophie took another step forward, her voice dropping. "Do they?" The air changed. Joaquin felt it, that shift in atmosphere he'd learned to recognize over 2 decades of navigating the underworld. The moment before someone pulled a gun. The second before a deal went bad. The heartbeat when you realized the person across from you knew more than they were saying. He watched the little girl watching him, and something cold slithered down his spine. "Sophie." Helena's voice carried warning now. "Go. Home." But Sophie didn't move. She looked at Helena, really looked at her, and something flickered across the child's face. Fear, maybe, or certainty. She knelt down so she was eye level with Joaquin, still on his knees on the pavement. Her small hand reached out, pointing at him with the directness only children possessed. "You're not dying," Sophie whispered, low enough that the ocean wind almost swallowed her words. Joaquin leaned closer. His hands were still shaking, his vision still swimming, but every instinct screamed at him to listen. "Your wife is spiking your food." Time stopped. The words hung in the air between them, simple, devastating, impossible. Joaquin's breath caught in his throat. His mind raced through the past 6 months like shuffling cards. Helena insisting on cooking, the bitter aftertaste some mornings, the green powder he'd glimpsed on the kitchen counter, the way she always watched him finish every meal. "What did you say?" His voice came out raw. Helena grabbed his arm. "Joaquin, don't. She's just a child. She doesn't understand. What did you say to me?" He couldn't look away from Sophie's face. The girl held his gaze for 3 more seconds. Then she stood, took 2 steps backward, and ran. Her yellow sweater disappeared around the bend in the path, her untied shoelace trailing behind her, her braid bouncing with each step. Within moments she was gone, swallowed by the evening shadows. That was completely inappropriate. Helena's hands cupped Joaquin's face, turning him toward her. "Baby, look at me. You're having an episode. We need to get you home. I'll make you the herbal tea Dr. Morrison recommended." "No." The word came out harder than he intended. Helena blinked. "What? I don't want the tea." Joaquin pushed himself to his feet, waving off her hands. His legs wobbled but held. "I don't want anything, Joaquin. I need to think." He started walking back toward the mansion, leaving Helena standing alone on the path. His mind was a hurricane of thoughts, each one more terrible than the last. Your wife is spiking your food. A child. A 7-year-old child had just accused his wife of poisoning him. It was insane. Paranoid. The fantasy of a little girl who'd seen too many crime shows. Except Joaquin had built an empire on reading people, on sensing danger, on knowing when someone was lying, and Sophie hadn't been lying. Behind him, he heard Helena's footsteps measured, controlled, the click of her heels on pavement. She caught up quickly, slipping her hand into his. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I should have spoken to Marta about keeping Sophie away from you during your walks. The poor thing is obviously confused. Maybe she heard something at school, some story about illness, and her imagination ran wild. Maybe. I'll talk to Marta tomorrow. Make sure Sophie understands she can't make up stories like that." Joaquin nodded but didn't speak. They reached the mansion's terrace as the sun finally disappeared below the horizon, painting the sky in blood reds and deep purples. Helena squeezed his hand. "Come inside. I'll make dinner. You barely ate lunch, you need to keep your strength up." Every word felt like a test now. Joaquin looked at the woman beside him, blonde hair gleaming in the fading light, emerald dress clinging to her perfect figure, diamond wedding ring catching the last rays of sun, beautiful, devoted, always at his side, always preparing his food. "I'm not hungry," he said. Something flickered across Helena's face, just for a heartbeat. Then her concerned smile returned. "Darling, you have to eat. I said I'm not hungry." He pulled his hand free and walked inside, leaving his wife standing alone in the dusk. In his study, Joaquin locked the door and sank into his leather chair. His hands were still trembling, but not from weakness this time, from rage, from fear, from the terrible possibility that a little girl in a yellow sweater had just saved his life. "Your wife is spiking your food." Tomorrow, he would find out if that was true. Tonight, he wouldn't eat a single thing Helena touched. Joaquin didn't sleep that night. He lay in the king-sized bed. Helena curled against his side, her breathing slow and steady. The moonlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows cast silver patterns across the ceiling patterns he'd memorized over countless sleepless nights as his body betrayed him in new ways. But tonight, his mind was razor-sharp despite the exhaustion pulling at his bones. "Your wife is spiking your food." He turned his head slightly, studying Helena's profile in the darkness. Even in sleep, she was beautiful, the kind of beauty that turned heads in restaurants, that made men stupid and reckless. Sharp cheekbones, full lips, hair that fell in perfect waves across the silk pillowcase. She'd been a decorator when they met, or so she'd said, hired to redesign the west wing of his Malibu estate. She'd walked into his study 18 months ago with fabric swatches and paint samples, and within 10 minutes, they were talking about Caravaggio instead of curtains. She understood art, music, literature. She'd traveled through Europe, spent summers in Tuscany, studied architecture in Barcelona. She was everything the women in his world weren't: refined, educated, utterly removed from the violence and blood money that funded his empire. He'd fallen fast and hard. They'd married 6 months ago in a private ceremony overlooking the ocean. 50 guests, a string quartet, Helena in ivory lace that cost more than most people's cars. His associates had called him lucky. His lawyer had called him impulsive. Marta had said nothing, but he'd seen the worry in her eyes. He should have listened to Marta. Helena stirred, her hand sliding across his chest. Even that simple touch made his stomach clench now, wondering if her fingers carried traces of whatever poison she'd been feeding him. If Sophie was right, if any of this was real. Joaquin slipped out of bed carefully, grabbing his robe. Helena murmured something in her sleep but didn't wake. He moved through the dark house like a ghost, his bare feet silent on marble floors. The kitchen was his destination. He hadn't really been in here since Helena had taken over. She'd insisted, 3 weeks after the wedding, claiming she wanted to care for her husband properly. That cooking for him would be an act of love, Marta had been relegated to cleaning only. The kitchen became Helena's domain. That's when the symptoms started. Joaquin flipped on the lights and stood in the doorway, studying the space with new eyes. Everything was pristine. Gleaming countertops, expensive copper pots hanging from racks, a shelf of herbs and spices arranged alphabetically. And there, on the far counter, a collection of glass jars filled with powders and dried plants. Helena's wellness remedies, she called them. Turmeric, ginger, ashwagandha, things that were supposed to boost immunity, reduce stress, improve vitality. He'd trusted her completely. Joaquin moved to the jars, picking up each one, studying the contents. Most looked exactly like what the labels claimed, but there was one pushed slightly to the back, unmarked, filled with a fine greenish powder. His hands shook as he twisted the lid. The smell hit him immediately. Bitter, chemical, wrong. This wasn't turmeric or matcha, or any of the organic supplements Helena claimed to blend into his morning smoothies. He set the jar down carefully, his heart pounding so hard he thought his ribs might crack. Sophie had been right. A 7-year-old child had seen what he'd been, too blind, too trusting, too stupidly in love to notice. The memory hit him like a fist to the gut. 3 months ago, the kitchen, late afternoon. He'd come home early from a meeting, walked in to find Helena at the counter, grinding something in a mortar and pestle. She'd jumped when she heard him. Actually jumped, her hand sweeping the grinding bowl aside. "You scared me," she'd laughed, pressing a hand to her chest. "I didn't hear you come in. What are you making?" He'd moved closer, trying to see. "Just prepping your evening tonic. The doctor said you needed more antioxidants, remember?" She'd kissed his cheek, effectively blocking his view. "Go shower. Dinner will be ready in 20 minutes. He'd left without questioning it. Left without seeing the greenish residue on the counter that she'd quickly wiped away. Joaquin gripped the edge of the sink, his vision blurring not from illness this time, but from rage. How many times had she done this? How many meals, smoothies, cups of tea had been laced with poison? How long had she been slowly killing him while sleeping beside him, kissing him, whispering, "I love you," every morning? "Joaquin?" He spun around. Helena stood in the doorway wearing a silk robe, her hair tousled, her expression concerned, the perfect picture of a worried wife. "Baby, what are you doing down here? It's 3 a.m. She moved toward him, reaching out. He stepped back. Something shifted in her eyes. Just for a heartbeat. Then the concern deepened. "Are you feeling worse? Should I call Dr. Morrison?" "No. You're scaring me. Talk to me." Joaquin looked at her. Really looked at her, trying to see past the beautiful mask to whatever was underneath. Was she a sociopath? A hired killer? Someone's plant sent to infiltrate his organization? Or was he losing his mind, seeing threats where there were none, paranoid from months of unexplained illness? "I couldn't sleep," he said finally. Helena smiled, relieved. "I'll make you chamomile tea. That always helps." "I don't want tea." The smile faltered. "Joaquin, I don't want anything you make. Not tonight." Silence stretched between them. The kitchen lights hummed overhead. Outside, the ocean crashed against the cliffs with steady, relentless force. "What did that girl say to you?" Helena asked quietly. "It doesn't matter." "It clearly does. You've been different since the walk. Distant. You wouldn't eat dinner, wouldn't drink the tonic I prepared." She stopped, seeming to realize how that sounded. "I'm worried about you." "Are you?" "Of course I am. You're my husband. I love you." Joaquin wanted to believe her. God, how he wanted to believe her. But the unmarked jar sat on the counter between them like a loaded gun. "I'm going back to bed," he said. He moved past her, careful not to touch her, and walked out of the kitchen. Behind him, he heard Helena stay behind, heard the soft clink of glass, hiding evidence maybe, or genuinely confused by her husband's sudden paranoia. He didn't know anymore. Back in his study, Joaquin locked the door and opened his laptop. His fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long moment before he typed 4 words into the search bar. Slow-acting poison symptoms. The results filled his screen. Arsenic, thallium, heavy metals. Each description matching his symptoms with terrifying accuracy. Tremors, weakness, gastrointestinal distress, vision problems, hair loss. He'd blamed stress. Age. The weight of running an empire, never once suspecting the woman who shared his bed. Joaquin pulled up his private investigator's number. The man answered on the second ring despite the hour. "I need a full background check." Joaquin said without preamble. Everything. Birth records, employment history, family connections, financial records, social media going back 10 years. Who's the target? Joaquin closed his eyes. My wife. The next morning, Joaquin sat at the breakfast table watching Helena cook. She moved through the kitchen with practiced elegance, humming softly as she whisked eggs and sliced fresh fruit. Sunlight streamed through the windows, turning her blonde hair to spun gold. She'd chosen a cream-colored silk blouse and tailored slacks effortlessly beautiful, as always. The perfect wife preparing breakfast for her husband. Joaquin's coffee sat untouched in front of him. She'd brought it out 10 minutes ago, setting it down with a kiss on his forehead. Drink it while it's hot, darling, she'd said. He hadn't lifted the cup. Almost ready. Helena glanced over her shoulder, smiling. I made your favorite scrambled eggs with chives, whole grain toast, that imported jam you love. I'm not very hungry. The smile tightened fractionally. You didn't eat dinner last night either. You need to keep your strength up. I'll grab something later. Helena turned fully now, concern etching lines around her eyes. Joaquin, this isn't healthy. You're already weak. Starving yourself will only make it worse. I'm not starving myself. Then eat. She carried the plate over, setting it in front of him. The eggs looked perfect, fluffy, garnished with fresh herbs. Please. Joaquin stared at the food. His stomach growled. He was genuinely hungry. Hadn't eaten anything substantial in almost 24 hours. But the unmarked jar from last night flashed through his mind. Actually, I need to head out early. He stood, grabbing his suit jacket from the chair. Meeting downtown. What meeting? You didn't mention. Just came up. I'll eat something on the way. He moved toward the door, but Helena caught his wrist. Her grip was gentle but firm. What's going on? She asked quietly. Ever since yesterday you've been acting strange. Did Sophie say something to upset you? There it was. The question she'd been circling around since last night. Joaquin met her eyes ice blue, searching his face. She's just a kid. A kid who said something that's clearly bothering you. It's nothing. Joaquin, I have to go. He pulled free and walked out, leaving his untouched breakfast cooling on the table. Marta found him in the garage 20 minutes later. She'd worked for Joaquin for 8 years, long before Helena, before the mansion renovations, back when his life was simpler and his enemies were easier to identify. She was in her early 40s, with graying hair pulled into a practical bun and hands weathered from years of labor. She'd raised Sophie alone after her husband died. Joaquin had given them both shelter, protection, stability. Now that little girl had potentially saved his life. Mr. Lozano? Marta stood in the doorway, wringing her hands. May I speak with you? Joaquin looked up from his car. Of course. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. It's about Sophie. Mrs. Lozano said she was inappropriate yesterday during your walk. I'm so sorry I've spoken to her about boundaries, but sometimes she doesn't understand. What exactly did Helena say? Marta hesitated. That Sophie made up stories. Said strange things about you being sick. Mrs. Lozano wants me to keep Sophie away from you during your evening walks. Joaquin's jaw tightened. What do you think Sophie saw? Sir? In the kitchen, when Helena cooks. What has Sophie noticed? Marta's eyes widened slightly. I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do. Silence stretched between them. Joaquin could see the war playing out on Marta's face. Loyalty to her employer versus protecting her daughter, versus something else. Fear, maybe. Finally, she spoke. Sophie mentioned powder, green powder. She said Mrs. Lozano gets upset when she comes into the kitchen unexpectedly. Marta's voice dropped. I told her she was imagining things. What else? She said the food tastes bitter sometimes, the herbal drinks you take. Marta's hands twisted the fabric of her apron. But children are picky eaters. I didn't think. Her voice broke. Mr. Lozano, what is Sophie saying? Joaquin studied the woman who'd served his household faithfully for nearly a decade. Have you eaten any of the food Helena prepares? Sometimes. Leftovers, mostly. Mrs. Lozano insists I finish whatever you don't eat. She says it's wasteful to throw away good food. How do you feel after eating it? Marta went very still. I've been not well. The past few weeks. Nausea. Dizziness. I thought it was just stress, or maybe I'm getting older. It's not stress. The words hung in the air like an executioner's blade. Marta's face drained of color. What are you saying? I'm saying Sophie is a very observant little girl, and you should stop eating anything Helena gives you. Dear God. Marta swayed, gripping the doorframe for support. You think she's that Mrs. Lozano is? I don't know what I think yet, but until I figure it out, you and Sophie need to be careful. Marta's eyes filled with tears. Why would she do this? What did you do to her? Nothing. As far as I know, nothing. Then why? That was the question keeping Joaquin awake at night. Why would the woman he'd married, who seemed to have everything she could want, be slowly poisoning him? I have people looking into it, he said. Until then, this conversation stays between us. You understand? If Helena suspects we know, she might do something worse. Marta finished, her voice barely a whisper. Joaquin nodded grimly. Marta straightened, wiping her eyes. What do you need me to do? Keep Sophie safe. Keep yourself safe. Watch Helena when she's in the kitchen, but don't let her know you're watching. And if you see anything suspicious, anything at all, you tell me immediately. Yes, sir. She turned to leave, then stopped. Mr. Lozano? Sophie wanted me to tell you something. She said you looked scared yesterday when she talked to you. I was. She said not to be scared. Because now you know the truth. Marta's voice strengthened. And the truth can save you. After she left, Joaquin sat alone in the garage, staring at his hands. The tremor that had plagued him for months was barely noticeable today. 24 hours without Helena's cooking, and his body was already recovering. The evidence was mounting. His phone buzzed a text from his private investigator. Found something. Call me. Joaquin dialed immediately. Tell me, your wife's employment history. The decorator firm she claimed to work for? It exists, but there's no record of a Helena Castellano ever being employed there. No tax documents, no contracts, nothing. Joaquin's blood ran cold. What else? Still digging, but boss? Whatever her real name is, Helena Castellano, isn't it? The woman he'd married was a ghost. Joaquin spent the next 72 hours playing the role of his life. He smiled at Helena over breakfast he didn't eat, kissed her goodnight in bed he barely slept in, complained about his symptoms while secretly cataloging every moment his strength returned. And he watched her. The way her fingers tightened around her wine glass when he pushed away his plate. The flash of something frustration, fear, that crossed her face when he claimed he'd already eaten downtown. The two careful questions about his appetite, his energy levels, his plans for the day. She was hunting for information just as desperately as he was. By the third morning, Joaquin could walk from the bedroom to his study without needing to steady himself against the wall. The tremor in his hands had diminished to a barely noticeable quiver. His vision was sharper, clearer than it had been in months. His body was purging whatever poison she'd been feeding him. The proof was undeniable now. He sat in his study, door locked, staring at the glass vial on his desk. He'd collected it himself, waited until Helena left for her yoga class, then carefully scraped residue from the mortar and pestle she kept in the locked cabinet beneath the spice rack. The cabinet she thought he didn't know about. The one that required a key she wore on a delicate chain around her neck. The one Marta had helped him access while Helena was gone. Inside, he'd found 3 more unmarked jars, notebooks with dosage calculations, recipes written in Helena's elegant handwriting, with notes like, increase to 15 milligrams, and symptoms accelerating reduce visibility. She'd been documenting his murder like a science experiment. Now the vial sat sealed in a plastic bag, ready for the private lab that owed Joaquin more favors than he could count. He'd sent it via courier an hour ago with instructions, full toxicology analysis, rush results. Money was no object. His phone rang. Talk to me, Joaquin said without preamble. His investigator's voice was grim. Helena Castellano doesn't exist before 3 years ago. The birth certificate is real, but the woman it belongs to died in a car accident in 2019. Your wife stole her identity. Joaquin's chest tightened. Real name? Still working on it, but I found something else. Property records show a warehouse lease in San Pedro, paid through a shell company. The company's registration traces back to an account your wife accessed 2 months before you met her. Send me the address. Boss, if this is what I think it is, send the address. A pause. Already in your email. But Joaquin, don't go alone. Whatever she's planning, she's been at it for years. This isn't improvised. It's calculated. Joaquin ended the call and pulled up the email. The warehouse was in an industrial district near the port 40 minutes from Malibu, a world away from mansion parties and ocean views. A place to hide things, or people. He was reaching for his car keys when someone knocked on the study door. Darling? Helena's voice, sweet and concerned. Are you in there? Joaquin slipped the keys into his pocket and opened the door. She stood in the hallway wearing a pale blue sundress, her hair swept up in a loose twist, beautiful as always, poisonous as arsenic in a crystal glass. "I was worried," she said. "You've been locked in here all morning, working. The port expansion deal needs attention. You work too hard." She stepped closer, her hand rising to touch his face. "You look better today, though. More color in your cheeks." "I feel better." Something flickered in her eyes. "Really? That's wonderful. Maybe the new supplements are finally working." "Maybe." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm making lunch. Your favorite, that pasta carbonara you love. Will you actually eat it this time?" "I'll try." "Good." She kissed his cheek, her lips cool against his skin. 30 minutes. She walked away, her footsteps echoing down the marble hallway. Joaquin closed the door and leaned against it, his heart hammering. The casual mention of supplements, the pointed question about eating, the way she was pushing food again after 3 days of his resistance. She was getting desperate, which meant she was dangerous. 20 minutes later, Joaquin slipped out through the garage. He'd told Marta he was leaving, told her to keep Sophie close and lock their quarters until he returned. The look in Marta's eyes had been pure fear. "Please be careful, Mr. Lozano." "I will." "And sir? Whatever you find," she'd gripped his arm. "Remember that she chose this. You didn't make her into a monster. She came to you as one." The words stayed with him during the drive to San Pedro. The warehouse sat between a shuttered fish processing plant and a container yard, its windows dark, its exterior covered in faded paint and rust. Joaquin parked 2 blocks away and approached on foot, his hand resting on the concealed firearm at his hip. The lock was commercial grade but yielded easily to the tools he'd brought. The door swung open with a metallic groan. Inside, the air was thick with dust and something chemical. Joaquin flipped on his phone's flashlight, sweeping the beam across the space. The warehouse was mostly empty, except for a table in the center covered in documents. He moved closer. Papers were spread across the surface in organized chaos. Photographs, bank statements, property deeds, organizational charts, his organizational charts. His businesses, his associates, his entire empire mapped out in meticulous detail. And photographs. Dozens of them. Joaquin picked up one, showing him leaving a restaurant 6 months before he'd met Helena. Another from a business meeting. Another from a charity gala. Someone had been following him, documenting his movements, his routines, his life, planning. His hands shook as he shuffled through more documents. A forged marriage certificate, predated by 2 years. Asset transfer forms with his signature, or a very good forgery. A will that left everything to Helena Castellano in the event of his death. She'd been building a legal framework to inherit his empire. Then he found the folder marked family. Inside were photos of people he'd never seen before. A middle-aged man in a suit. A younger man with dark hair and familiar eyes. A woman and 3 children. And beneath the photos, a single document. A death certificate. Name, Roberto Fuentes. Age, 48. Cause of death. Gunshot wounds sustained during gang-related violence. Date. 7 years ago. Location. A warehouse in Long Beach that Joaquin's organization had raided during a territorial dispute with a rival cartel. He didn't recognize the name. Didn't remember the specific operation. There had been so many. So much blood. So many bodies that blurred together over the years. But someone remembered. Joaquin flipped to the next photo and his breath caught. The younger man with dark hair stood beside Roberto Fuentes, smiling, their arms around each other's shoulders. On the back, written in Helena's handwriting, "Father and brother, before you killed them both." The warehouse spun. Helena wasn't a random threat. She was revenge in a beautiful package. She was retribution dressed in emerald silk, and he'd married her without knowing he'd already destroyed her family. Joaquin's phone buzzed a text from the lab. "Results ready. Call immediately," he called. "Thallium sulfate," the lab tech said without preamble. "Extremely toxic, slow-acting. The dosage pattern suggests administration over months. Another few weeks and the damage would have been irreversible. Organ failure. Neurological collapse. You're lucky you stopped ingesting it when you did." Joaquin ended the call and stood alone in the warehouse, surrounded by evidence of his own murder. Lucky. A 7-year-old girl had saved him. Now he had to decide what to do about the woman who'd tried to kill him. The woman whose father he'd killed without even knowing his name. Joaquin drove back to Malibu with the folder on the passenger seat. Roberto Fuentes, a name that meant nothing to him, a face he didn't recognize. A man who'd died 7 years ago in an operation. Joaquin barely remembered one raid among dozens, one body among hundreds that had fallen in the endless territorial wars that built his empire. But to Helena, that body had been everything. Father. The word echoed in his mind as he navigated the coastal highway, ocean sprawling to his left, the setting sun painting the water in shades of amber and blood. He'd killed her father. Not personally, perhaps, but his orders, his operation, his war. The distinction felt meaningless now, and she'd made him pay for it by becoming his wife. The mansion was quiet when he arrived. Joaquin found Marta in the kitchen, preparing dinner alone. She startled when he entered, her hand flying to her chest. "Mr. Lozano, I didn't hear you come in. Where's Helena?" "Upstairs. She said she had a headache." Marta's voice dropped. "She was upset you missed lunch. Threw the entire meal in the garbage." Joaquin set the folder on the counter. "I need you to look at something." He opened it to the family photograph Roberto Fuentes, with his arm around the younger man. Both of them smiling at a backyard barbecue. "Do you recognize anyone in this picture?" Marta leaned closer, squinting. Her face went pale. That's Mrs. Lozano's brother." "What?" "I met him once, at the wedding." Marta pointed to the younger man. He introduced himself as Helena's brother, Diego. He gave a toast, talked about how happy he was that his sister found someone who would take care of her. Joaquin's blood turned to ice. "Describe him. Everything you remember. Tall, maybe 6 feet, dark hair, brown eyes, well-dressed. He seemed charming, sophisticated. He said he worked in finance, lived in New York." Marta frowned. "Why? What's wrong?" "Diego isn't her brother. Joaquin stopped himself. The truth was too complicated, too dangerous to share completely. "He's involved in whatever Helena has been planning." Marta gripped the counter. "Planning what, Mr. Lozano? Please, just tell me what's happening." Joaquin pulled out another document, the death certificate. "Helena's real father was killed 7 years ago. In Long Beach, during one of my operations. She blames me for his death." "Dear God, everything about her is a lie, Marta. The decorator job, her background, her family at the wedding, all of it fabricated. She's been preparing to destroy me since before we ever met." Marta sank into a chair, her hands shaking. "The brother, Diego, if he's part of this, he's the one orchestrating it. I'd bet my life on it." Joaquin's jaw clenched. "She married me, gained access to everything, started poisoning me slowly, and when I was weak enough, sick enough, she would have framed me." Marta whispered. Sophie heard her talking on the phone last week. She didn't understand what it meant, but Mrs. Lozano said something about, "The maid will make a perfect scapegoat." Rage flooded through Joaquin like molten steel. Not just attempted murder conspiracy. Frame an innocent woman, take everything, and disappear into his empire as the grieving widow. It was brilliant, thorough, almost perfect. Almost. "Where's Sophie now?" Joaquin asked. "In our quarters. I've kept her there like you said." "Good. Keep her there. Don't let her out of your sight." Marta stood, her fear transforming into something harder. "What are you going to do?" "What I should have done the moment I suspected." Joaquin gathered the documents. "I'm going to confront my wife." He found Helena in their bedroom, sitting at her vanity, brushing her hair. She met his eyes in the mirror and smiled. "There you are. I was beginning to worry." Joaquin closed the door behind him. "We need to talk. About lunch?" "Darling, I'm not angry. I know you're busy." "About Roberto Fuentes." The hairbrush stopped mid-stroke. Helena's reflection in the mirror went very still, her face a perfect mask. But Joaquin had spent 2 decades reading people, identifying the micro-expressions that betrayed truth, and he saw at that fraction of a second where her entire facade cracked. "I don't know who that is," she said carefully. "Your father. My father's name was Richard Castellano. He died when I was..." "Helena Castellano died in 2019. You stole her identity." Joaquin moved closer, his voice deadly calm. "Your real father was Roberto Fuentes. He died 7 years ago in Long Beach, during a raid on a warehouse my organization targeted." She turned slowly, the brush still in her hand. Her ice blue eyes held nothing now. No warmth, no love, no pretense, just calculation. "How long have you known?" she asked quietly. "Does it matter?" "I suppose not." She set down the brush with deliberate care. "Are you going to kill me?" "I should." But you won't. Helena stood, smoothing her dress. Because despite everything, you actually love me, and that's your weakness, Joaquin. You let people close. You trust. You believe in redemption and second chances. You've been poisoning me for 6 months. Thallium sulfate, carefully calibrated doses. You would have had maybe another month before total organ failure. She said it the way someone might discuss the weather. I've been tracking your decline meticulously. It was actually fascinating watching your body betray you. Joaquin's hands clenched into fists. Why not just shoot me? Why the elaborate charade? Because shooting you would have been too quick, too merciful. Helena's voice turned to ice. You killed my father. You destroyed my family. My brother and I lost everything because of your war, your greed, your empire. I didn't even know his name. Exactly. She laughed, bitter and sharp. You ruined our lives and you didn't even know his name. He was nothing to you, just another body, another casualty in your endless violence. But he was everything to us. Joaquin thought of the little boy in the photographs, the family barbecues, the life that had existed before his organization's bullets tore through it. So you decided to take everything from me. Yes, marry you, make you love me, gain legal access to your empire, and when you died sick, weak, pathetic, I would take it all. Your money, your power, your legacy. I would burn it to the ground from the inside. Her eyes glittered with malice. And I would have blamed that simple maid. The police would have found the poison in her quarters. Everything pointed to her. Marta had nothing to do with this. I know, that's what made it perfect. Helena smiled. A jealous servant, resentful of the new wife. Easy story. Believable. She would have gone to prison while I consolidated control. And your brother? Diego has been planning this for years. Finding you, researching you, creating my new identity. He's been in the shadows the entire time, moving pieces into place. Her voice filled with pride. We were so close, Joaquin. So close. Until a child saw what you were doing. Helena's expression darkened. That little brat. I should have been more careful. Should have locked the kitchen door. Rage exploded in Joaquin's chest. Don't talk about Sophie. Why? She ruined everything. One stupid whisper and you stopped eating. Stopped trusting. Helena's composure finally cracked. 3 days. 3 days without the poison and you're already recovering. Do you know how long it took me to get you that week? How carefully I had to calibrate every dose. You're insane. I'm Justice. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. You killed my father without even knowing his name. I made you love me before I destroyed you. Tell me, Joaquin, which of us is the monster? Joaquin stared at the woman he'd married, seeing her clearly for the first time. Not the elegant decorator with a passion for art. Not the devoted wife who'd whispered, I love you in the darkness. Not even the calculated killer documenting his slow death in notebooks. He saw a daughter who'd watched her father die. A sister who'd spent years planning revenge. A woman who'd turned herself into a weapon and aimed directly at his heart. I'm calling the police, Joaquin said quietly. Helena laughed, sharp and brittle. No, you're not. You just confessed to attempted murder. And you'll tell them what? That your wife of 6 months has been poisoning you? She tilted her head, calculating. You're Joaquin Lozano. Half the force is on your payroll, the other half wants you in prison. They'll investigate you before they investigate me. They'll dig into your empire, your money, your operations. Is that really what you want? She was right, and she knew it. Joaquin pulled out his phone. Then I won't call the police. I'll call my people. The ones who make problems disappear. You mean murder me? Helena's eyes flashed. Go ahead. Pull the trigger yourself this time instead of hiding behind your organization. At least give me the same courtesy you gave my father. His finger hovered over the contact. One call and Helena would vanish. Diego too, once they found him. Clean. Efficient. The way problems were solved in his world. But Marta's words echoed in his mind. She came to you as a monster. And so had he, years ago, when he'd ordered that raid in Long Beach, when he'd built an empire on violence and blood money, when he'd made decisions that destroyed families without learning their names. Roberto Fuentes. A man with children. A backyard barbecue. A life before Joaquin's bullets ended it. I'm not going to kill you, Joaquin said finally. Helena's eyebrows rose. No? But you're not walking away from this either. He pocketed his phone. We're going to settle this. Tonight, downstairs. Dinner table. I don't understand. You wanted to destroy me over dinner? Fine, let's have dinner. His voice was cold, controlled. You, me, and the truth. And we'll see who's still standing when it's over. 30 minutes later, Joaquin sat at the head of the dining table in the formal dining room. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across white linens and fine china. The setting was absurdly elegant for what was about to happen. Helena entered wearing a black cocktail dress, her hair swept up, diamond earrings catching the light. She'd applied fresh makeup, transforming herself back into the perfect wife. The performance continued even now. She took her seat at the opposite end of the table. 12 feet of polished mahogany between them. This feels dramatic, she said lightly. Are we having a Last Supper? Something like that. Joaquin gestured to the covered dishes Marta had prepared and placed between them. I thought we should eat together. One final meal. How romantic. Helena's smile was poison. What are we having? Your specialty. The pasta carbonara you've made me a dozen times. Her smile faltered. And the herbal tea, the smoothies, the vitamin tonics. Joaquin lifted the cover off the first dish, revealing a plate of pasta. Everything you've lovingly prepared for me over the past 6 months. Helena went very still. I had Marta recreate your recipes exactly. Same ingredients, same portions, same careful preparation. He pushed the plate toward her across the table. Eat it, Joaquin. You said the supplements were working, that I looked better, that the food would help me recover. His voice was ice. So eat it. Prove it's safe. This is ridiculous. Is it? He stood, moving around the table with predatory calm. You've been feeding me this for months, insisting I finish every bite, getting upset when I refused. Surely what's good for me is good for you. Helena's composure cracked. I'm not hungry. Neither was I, but you insisted. Every single day. He was beside her now, gripping the back of her chair. Now I'm insisting. Eat. No, eat it. The words echoed off the walls like a gunshot. Helena flinched, her mask finally shattering. Her hands shook as she stared at the plate, at the food she'd used as a weapon, now turned back on her. You can't make me, she whispered. Can't I? Joaquin's voice dropped dangerously low. You came into my home, lied to me, made me love you, and you poisoned me for 6 months while planning to frame an innocent woman and steal everything I've built. He leaned closer. So yes, Helena, or whatever your real name is, I can make you. She turned to face him, tears streaming down her face now, the beautiful facade crumbling completely. You killed my father. I know. You destroyed my family. I know. And you don't even care. She was sobbing now, years of rage and grief pouring out. You didn't know his name, didn't know he had children, didn't know anything about the lives you ruined. You're right. Joaquin's voice softened, just slightly. I didn't know. I gave orders and people died and I never looked back. I built an empire on blood and told myself it was necessary, that it was just business. So you admit it. Yes, he straightened, his eyes hard. And you know what that makes me? A criminal, a killer, a man with blood on his hands. He gestured to the food, but it doesn't make you right. It makes you the same. I'm nothing like you. You poisoned me. You planned to frame Marta. You would have destroyed her life, sent her to prison, separated her from her daughter, all so you could have your revenge. Joaquin's voice turned to steel. So tell me, Helena, what's the difference between killing a father and framing a mother? Between ruining my family and destroying hers? Silence filled the room. Helena stared at him, her tears drying, her face a mask of devastation. The difference, she said finally, is that you deserve it. Maybe I do. Joaquin pulled out his phone, pressing a button. But that's not your decision to make. The dining room doors opened. 2 men in suits entered private security, loyal to Joaquin for years. Behind them came someone Helena clearly didn't expect. Diego. Her brother was handcuffed, his face bruised, his expensive suit torn. He'd been picked up 3 hours ago from the warehouse in San Pedro. Helena shot to her feet. What did you do to him? Nothing yet. Joaquin gestured and the guards forced Diego into a chair. But I wanted him here. For this. For what? For the choice. Joaquin stood between the siblings, his empire's power radiating from every word. You tried to destroy me. You almost succeeded. And now I'm giving you one chance to walk away from this alive. I don't want your mercy. It's not mercy. It's justice. He gestured to the plate of poisoned food. You eat what you've been feeding me. Every bite. We document it. Medical supervision. The full evidence of what you've done. You confess to everything. The false identity. The poison. The conspiracy. The plan to frame Marta. Helena's face went white. That would kill me. Not immediately. And the doctors can administer treatment. You'll survive barely. His eyes were merciless. Or option 2. I turn everything over to the federal authorities. The fake identity. The attempted murder. The conspiracy. You and Diego both go to prison for life. Those are my choices. Die slowly or rot in prison. No. Joaquin's voice softened, just slightly. There's a third option. The third option, Joaquin said, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade, is that you tell me everything. Every detail. Who helped you, how you planned it, what you were going to do next. Full confession, full cooperation. Helena's eyes narrowed. And then what? You kill us quietly? No. Joaquin moved to the window, looking out at the darkening ocean. Then I hand you to federal authorities, but I also give them something else, evidence of the corruption in my organization. Names, operations, the people who actually gave the order that killed your father. Diego spoke for the first time, his voice rough. You'd turn on your own people? They're not my people. Not anymore. Joaquin turned back to face them. I've been thinking about what Sophie said, about truth, about how a child saw what adults chose to ignore. He looked at Helena. You wanted justice for your father, but you went after the wrong person. You built the empire, Helena spat. You gave the orders. I built an empire, yes, but the Long Beach raid? I didn't order that. Joaquin pulled out his phone, opening a file. I had my people dig into the archives. 7 years ago, I was in San Diego negotiating a territory deal. The Long Beach operation was run by my second-in-command at the time, a man named Dominic Raines. He turned the phone toward them, showing a photograph of a heavy-set man with cold eyes. Raines acted without authorization, made decisions I didn't know about. By the time I found out, your father was already dead and Raines was covering his tracks. Joaquin's jaw clenched. I removed him from my organization 2 years ago for similar unauthorized actions. He's currently running his own operation out of Las Vegas. Diego stared at the photograph, something shifting in his expression. That's the man? That's who actually killed our father? His men pulled the triggers. He gave the orders. And you expect us to believe you had nothing to do with it? Helena's voice dripped with skepticism. I expect you to believe that I'm giving you the choice your father never got the chance to actually punish the people responsible, instead of destroying everyone in proximity. Joaquin set his phone down. You wanted revenge. I'm offering you justice. Real justice. Helena and Diego exchanged glances, a silent conversation passing between them. What's the catch? Diego asked. You both testify. Full cooperation with federal authorities. You give them everything you know about Raines, and I give them everything I know about his current operations. Together, we put him away for life. In exchange for what? Helena's voice was bitter. Reduced sentences? Witness protection? In exchange for your lives. Joaquin's voice hardened. And for the truth to actually matter. Your father's name on record. His death investigated properly. The real killers held accountable. Diego leaned forward despite his handcuffs. You'd really burn your own organization for this? Parts of it. The parts that deserve to burn. Joaquin met his eyes. I'm not innocent, Diego. I built this empire on violence, but I'm trying to be better than the man I was 7 years ago. The man who didn't even learn the names of the people his war destroyed. Pretty words, Helena said coldly. But why should we trust you? Because the alternative is that plate of food, Joaquin gestured to the poisoned pasta. And I don't want to watch you die. Even after everything, I don't want that. Silence stretched between them, heavy and dangerous. Finally, Helena spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I loved him, my father. He wasn't a saint. He worked in your world, dealt with dangerous people. But he was good to us. He coached Diego's soccer team. He taught me to paint. Tears slipped down her cheeks. And one day men broke into his warehouse and shot him 6 times while I was home waiting for him to come to my quinceañera. Joaquin felt something crack in his chest. How old were you? 15. 15. The same age as the girl in the family photos. The same age when everything had been stolen from her. I'm sorry, Joaquin said, and meant it. I'm sorry for the world that did that to you. For the system that made men like me and Rains possible. For the fact that your father's death was just another Tuesday in a war that never ended. Helena wiped her eyes, her voice strengthening. Sorry doesn't bring him back. No, but maybe justice can give you something sorry can't. Diego shifted in his chair, the handcuffs clinking. If we do this, if we testify, Rains will come after us. His organization, his connections, we'd be targets for life. Federal protection. New identities. I'll also set up a trust fund, separate from anything traceable to me. Enough money to start over, anywhere you want. Joaquin's voice was firm. And I'll make sure Rains knows why he's going down. That Roberto Fuentes' children put him there. You'd do that? Helena's skepticism remained. Set us free with money after we tried to kill you? I'd do that because a little girl had the courage to tell the truth when it could have gotten her killed. Joaquin thought of Sophie pointing at him with conviction in her eyes. And because maybe, somewhere in this mess, we can stop the cycle. You got revenge on the wrong person. I can help you get justice on the right one. Diego looked at his sister. Helena? She stared at Joaquin for a long moment, searching his face for deception, for the trap she was certain existed. If we do this, she said finally, I want my father's name cleared. I want it on record that he wasn't just a casualty, that he mattered. Done. And I want Marta protected, compensated for what I almost did to her. Joaquin's eyebrows rose slightly. Agreed. And I want to look Rains in the eye when he realizes we destroyed him. I'll arrange it. Helena stood slowly, moving to where her brother sat in handcuffs. She placed her hand on his shoulder. We do this together, she said to Diego. For Papa. Diego nodded, his jaw tight with emotion. For Papa. Joaquin gestured to his security. Remove the handcuffs. They're cooperating witnesses now, not prisoners. As the metal fell away from Diego's wrists, Joaquin pulled out his phone and made a call. It's me. I need a direct line to the FBI. Priority 1. I'm ready to talk about Dominic Rains. He paused. And I have 2 witnesses who can bury him. 3 hours later, federal agents filled Joaquin's study. Helena and Diego sat across from a senior prosecutor, detailing everything, the false identity, the warehouse in San Pedro, the poison, the plan to frame Marta, and most importantly, their father's death. The prosecutor listened, recording everything, his expression growing darker with each revelation. Dominic Rains, he said finally. We've been trying to build a case against him for years. If you can give us what you're promising. We can, Diego said firmly. Names, dates, operations. Everything our father knew before he died. Everything we learned tracking the people responsible. The prosecutor looked at Joaquin. And you're willing to testify about the Long Beach raid? Confirm that Rains acted without authorization? Yes. And I'll provide documentation of his other unauthorized actions. Pattern of behavior. Proof he was running his own operations within my organization. This is unprecedented. The prosecutor shook his head. Joaquin Lozano cooperating with federal authorities. Times change. Joaquin's voice was quiet. People change. Or they should try to. As the federal agents continued their questioning, Joaquin stepped out onto the terrace. The ocean was black under a moonless sky, waves crashing against the cliffs with relentless force. He heard soft footsteps behind him. Helena stood in the doorway. No longer the elegant wife or the calculating killer. Just a woman who'd spent 7 years drowning in grief and rage. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For giving us the third option. For caring about my father's name. She moved to stand beside him. I really did love you, you know. At first it was just the plan, but somewhere along the way, her voice broke. I hated myself for it. I know. Do you? Do you really know what it's like to love someone you're supposed to destroy? Joaquin thought of the woman he'd married, the lies he'd believed, the betrayal that had nearly killed him. Yeah, he said. I do now. The federal prosecutor left at 2 a.m, with enough evidence to dismantle Dominic Rains' entire operation. Helena and Diego were placed in protective custody, not prison, but a secure location until the trial. Joaquin watched the convoy of black SUVs disappear down the coastal highway, taking with them the woman who'd tried to kill him and the brother who'd orchestrated it all. He should have felt victorious, relieved, something. Instead, he felt hollow. Mr. Lozano? He turned to find Marta standing in the doorway, her face lined with exhaustion and worry. It's over, Joaquin said quietly. They're cooperating with the authorities. You're safe. Sophie's safe. Marta's shoulders sagged with relief. Thank God. Then her expression shifted to concern. But you're not, are you? Safe, I mean. What do you mean? The poison. 6 months of it in your system. She moved closer, her voice gentle. Even though you stopped eating it, the damage is already done, isn't it? Joaquin hadn't wanted to think about that. Hadn't wanted to face the reality that even though he'd survived Helena's plan, the poison might still kill him anyway. The doctors will figure it out, he said, unconvincing even to himself. Mr. Lozano, I'm fine, Marta. You're not, and pretending won't change that. She was right. The tremors had lessened, the weakness had faded, but there were other symptoms now. Headaches that felt like ice picks behind his eyes. Moments where his heart raced for no reason. A persistent nausea that no amount of clean food could settle. Thallium sulfate. Slow-acting. Irreversible damage if left too long. The lab tech's words haunted him. Another few weeks and the damage would have been irreversible. How much damage had already been done? There has to be an antidote, Marta pressed. Something to counteract the poison. The authorities, they can force Helena to tell them what will help. She already told them everything she knows. The formula, the dosage, the timeline. Joaquin's voice was flat. There's no magic cure, Marta. Just time and treatment and hope that my organs can recover. Then we get you the best treatment. The best doctors. I already have the best doctors. They've been treating symptoms they couldn't identify for 6 months. He laughed bitterly. Turns out your wife is poisoning you wasn't on their diagnostic checklist. Marta's eyes filled with tears. This isn't fair. You did the right thing. You chose justice over revenge. And you might still die anyway. Life isn't fair. We both know that. But Sophie saved you. She spoke up. She told the truth. That has to mean something. That has to matter. Joaquin thought of the little girl pointing at him with absolute conviction. The bravery it took to accuse a powerful woman of attempted murder. The innocence that saw truth where adults saw only what they wanted to believe. It does matter, he said quietly. She gave me time I wouldn't have had. She gave me the chance to make this right or at least less wrong. Then don't waste it. Marta gripped his arm with surprising strength. Fight. Get treatment. Let the doctors try everything they can. Don't just accept this. I'm tired, Marta. I know, but you're also strong. Stronger than the poison. Stronger than Helena's revenge. Her voice cracked. Please, Mr. Lozano. Sophie keeps asking if you're okay. She's terrified she didn't save you after all. Don't let her be right. The words hit him like a physical blow. Sophie, 7 years old. Brave beyond measure, thinking she'd failed. Where is she now? Joaquin asked. Asleep. Finally. She cried herself exhausted, asking if you were going to die. Joaquin closed his eyes, pain lancing through his chest that had nothing to do with poison. Bring her to me tomorrow. I need to talk to her. You'll get treatment? I'll get treatment. Marta nodded, wiping her eyes. Thank you, sir. After she left, Joaquin made a call to his private physician, the one who'd been baffled by his symptoms for months. I know what's been poisoning me, Joaquin said without preamble. Thallium sulfate, 6 months of exposure. I need you to assemble a team. Best toxicologists you can find. I don't care what it costs. The doctor's sharp intake of breath was audible. Thallium, my God, Joaquin, that's... I know what it is. Can you treat it? We can try. Prussian blue is the standard treatment. Helps eliminate the thallium from your body. But after 6 months, he paused. We need to run comprehensive tests. Blood work, kidney function, liver panels, neurological assessments. The damage could be extensive. Then let's find out how extensive. I'll have the team assembled by morning. We'll start immediately. Joaquin ended the call and walked to the bedroom he'd shared with Helena. Her things were still there. Dresses in the closet, cosmetics on the vanity, books on the nightstand. Evidence of a life that had been entirely fabricated. He opened the drawer of her nightstand and found what he was looking for, the notebook where she'd documented his decline. Page after page of clinical observations, dosage calculations, symptom tracking. Day 47. Tremors increasing, sleep disrupted, appetite declining, increased dosage to 12 milligrams. Day 89. Significant weakness, vision problems emerging, on schedule. Day 156. Near collapse during evening walk. Excellent progress. Estimate 4 to 6 weeks until critical threshold. She'd been so close. Another month and he would have been beyond saving. But she'd underestimated a child's observant eyes and willingness to speak truth to power. Joaquin carried the notebook to the fireplace and watched it burn, the pages curling and blackening, Helena's careful documentation turning to ash. Then he went to his study and began making arrangements. Medical team, toxicology specialists, round-the-clock monitoring. Whatever it took to undo the damage Helena had done, but there was something else he needed to arrange, something more important than his own recovery. He pulled up the legal documents his attorney had prepared months ago. The trust fund for Sophie, the permanent security for Marta, the guarantees he'd promised, and he added more. Full college fund, protected housing, legal guardianship papers ensuring that if anything happened to Marta, Sophie would be cared for by people Joaquin trusted, not thrown into the system. Because the little girl who'd saved his life deserved more than just money. She deserved safety, opportunity, a future that wasn't defined by violence and revenge, a future better than the one Helena and Diego had gotten after their father died. The cycle had to break somewhere. Maybe it could break here. At dawn, the medical team arrived. They transformed one of the mansion's guest rooms into a temporary treatment facility, bringing equipment that beeped and hummed and monitored every function of Joaquin's failing body. The tests confirmed what he'd feared. Kidney damage, liver stress, neurological impacts that might be permanent. But the lead toxicologist, a severe woman named Dr. Chen, offered something unexpected: hope. The Prussian blue treatment will help eliminate remaining thallium, she explained, reviewing his charts. Your kidney function is compromised but not critical. Liver enzymes are elevated but recovering. The neurological symptoms. She paused. Those are harder to predict. You may have permanent tremors. Possible cognitive impacts. We won't know the full extent for months. But I'll live? If you follow the treatment protocol exactly. No deviation. No shortcuts. Her eyes were stern. You stopped ingesting the poison just in time, Mr. Lozano. Another 2 weeks and we'd be having a very different conversation. 2 weeks. Sophie had given him those 2 weeks by finding the courage to whisper truth to a dangerous man. Start the treatment, Joaquin said. They did. The Prussian blue made him violently ill at first. Nausea, cramping, a bone-deep exhaustion that made Helena's poison feel gentle by comparison. But Dr. Chen assured him it was working, that his body was purging the toxin that had been killing him slowly for half a year. On the 3rd day of treatment, Marta brought Sophie to visit. The little girl stood in the doorway of the treatment room, her eyes wide, taking in the medical equipment and IV lines and monitors. Hi, Mr. Lozano, she said quietly. Hi, Sophie. Joaquin gestured to the chair beside his bed. Come sit with me? She approached carefully, climbing into the chair with her legs tucked under her. She wore her yellow sweater, the same one from that evening on the cliffs. Mama said you're getting better, Sophie said. Is that true? Yes, because of you. Because I told you about the poison? Because you were brave enough to tell me the truth even when it was scary. Joaquin's voice was gentle. You saved my life, Sophie. Her eyes filled with tears. I thought maybe I didn't. I thought maybe I was too late. You weren't too late. You were exactly on time. Sophie wiped her eyes with her sleeve. Mrs. Helena was really bad, wasn't she? Yeah, she was. Are you sad? Because you loved her? The question was so direct, so childishly honest, that Joaquin had to pause. I'm sad about a lot of things, he said finally. But mostly I'm grateful. For you. Mama says you're going to help us. Give us money and stuff. More than money. I'm going to make sure you're always safe. That you can go to any school you want. That you never have to be afraid. Sophie considered this seriously. Why? Because you did something really brave. And brave people deserve to be protected. She smiled then, small but genuine. Okay. They sat together in comfortable silence, the medical equipment beeping steadily, the morning sun streaming through the windows. And for the first time in months, Joaquin felt something other than fear, or rage, or betrayal. He felt hope. The trial of Dominic Raines began 6 weeks after Joaquin started treatment. By then, the Prussian blue therapy had purged most of the thallium from his system. The tremors remained a permanent reminder of how close he'd come to death, but Dr. Chen said they might fade with time. His kidney and liver function were improving steadily. The headaches had lessened to occasional rather than constant. He was alive. Damaged, but alive. And he was going to testify. The federal courthouse in downtown Los Angeles was a fortress of marble and security checkpoints. Joaquin arrived in a convoy of SUVs, flanked by private security and federal marshals. The media circus outside was intense cameras, reporters shouting questions, protesters holding signs about organized crime. Inside, the atmosphere was different, quieter, heavier with the weight of justice delayed but finally arriving. Helena and Diego were already there, seated in the witness section. Helena wore a simple gray suit, her blonde hair pulled back severely. She looked smaller somehow, diminished without the designer clothes and diamond jewelry. Their eyes met across the courtroom. She nodded slightly. Not forgiveness, they were too far past that for forgiveness, but acknowledgement, recognition that they were both here trying to make something right out of something terrible. Dominic Raines sat at the defense table, flanked by expensive lawyers. He was exactly as the photographs showed, heavy-set, cold-eyed, radiating the kind of casual menace that came from decades of violence. He looked at Joaquin and smiled. Like this was all a game. Like he'd already won. The smile vanished when the prosecution called its first witness. The United States calls Diego Fuentes. Diego took the stand, his hand steady on the Bible as he swore to tell the truth. Then he began to speak. He told them about his father, Roberto Fuentes, warehouse manager, soccer coach, and family man. He described the night 7 years ago when his father went to work and never came home, the police investigation that went nowhere, the closed case that blamed gang violence and moved on. I was 17, Diego said, his voice strong despite the emotion. My sister was 15, and our father was dead because someone decided his life didn't matter. The prosecutor walked him through the evidence, phone records, warehouse logs, witness statements they'd uncovered. All of it pointing to Dominic Raines giving orders for an unauthorized raid, an illegal operation, a killing that had nothing to do with territorial disputes, and everything to do with Raines's private war. He murdered my father to cover up his own theft from Mr. Lozano's organization, Diego said. And then he let the blame fall on gang violence so no one would investigate further. Raines's lawyer objected repeatedly. The judge overruled him each time. When Diego stepped down, Helena took the stand. She was calmer than her brother, more controlled. She described the years of grief, the obsession with finding who was responsible, the plan that had consumed her life. I blamed Mr. Lozano, she said clearly. I thought he'd ordered my father's death, so I created a false identity, infiltrated his life, and tried to kill him. The courtroom rippled with murmurs. But I was wrong. The man who actually killed my father, who gave the orders, who pulled the trigger, is sitting at that table. She pointed directly at Raines. Dominic Raines, and I'm here to make sure he pays for what he did. She detailed everything. The documents she'd found, the connections she'd traced, the evidence that Raines had been running unauthorized operations for years, skimming money and eliminating anyone who discovered it, including Roberto Fuentes. When the prosecution finished, Raines's defense attorney approached for cross-examination. Miss Fuentes, or should I say, Miss Castellano, given your false identity, you admit to attempted murder, to fraud, to conspiracy. And now you expect this court to believe your testimony against my client? I expect this court to look at the evidence, Helena replied evenly. My crimes don't erase his. You're a self-confessed liar and would-be killer. Why should anyone believe anything you say? Because I'm not the only one testifying. Helena's voice was steady. And unlike your client, I'm willing to face consequences for what I've done. The lawyer tried several more angles, but Helena didn't crack. Neither did Diego when he was recalled. Then the prosecution called Joaquin. He walked to the stand on legs that only trembled slightly, raised his right hand, and swore the oath. The prosecutor began gently. Mr. Lozano, can you describe your relationship with the defendant? Dominic Raines worked for my organization for 12 years. He was my second in command until I removed him for unauthorized actions. What kind of unauthorized actions? Operations I didn't approve, money transfers I didn't authorize, decisions made in my name without my knowledge or consent. Joaquin walked them through it, the paper trail showing Raines's independent operations, the discrepancies in financial records, the pattern of behavior that had finally gotten him expelled from the organization, including the Long Beach raid 7 years ago? The prosecutor asked. Yes, I was in San Diego that night, negotiating a territory agreement. Raines told me the warehouse situation had been handled. I didn't know until later that he'd ordered a raid without authorization. By the time I learned the details, Roberto Fuentes was already dead. Did you order Mr. Fuentes' death? No. I didn't even know his name until recently. Did you authorize the raid that led to his death? No. The prosecutor displayed documents, text messages, financial records, witness statements. All of it showing Raines operating independently, stealing from Joaquin's organization, and killing Roberto Fuentes to cover it up. "Why are you testifying today, Mr. Lozano?" the prosecutor asked. "You're admitting to running a criminal organization. You could face charges yourself." Joaquin looked at Helena, then at Diego, then at Rains. "Because a 7-year-old girl taught me something about truth," he said quietly. "She saw something wrong and spoke up even though it was dangerous, even though she could have stayed silent and stayed safe. And if she can be that brave, then I can at least tell the truth about what happened to Roberto Fuentes." The defense attorney's cross-examination was brutal. He attacked Joaquin's credibility, his criminal history, his motivations for testifying. "Isn't it true, Mr. Lozano, that you're only here because Helena Fuentes tried to kill you? That this is your revenge?" "No, this is justice. There's a difference. You expect us to believe a known criminal is suddenly concerned with justice? I expect you to look at the evidence. Rains killed Roberto Fuentes. He's killed others, and he should answer for it." The trial continued for 3 more days. Forensic accountants testified about the money trail. Ballistics experts connected the bullets that killed Roberto Fuentes to weapons registered to Rains's personal security. Former associates broke their silence, describing Rains's pattern of unauthorized violence. The evidence was overwhelming. On the 4th day, the jury returned, guilty on all counts: murder, racketeering, conspiracy, theft. Rains's face went purple with rage. He lunged toward the prosecutor's table, screaming obscenities, before marshals tackled him to the ground. The judge's gavel cracked like thunder. "Order! Order in this court!" Joaquin watched them drag Rains away, still screaming, still raging. The man who'd killed Roberto Fuentes and destroyed a family without a second thought. Helena was crying silently. Diego had his arm around her shoulders. Justice. Imperfect, incomplete, but real. As they filed out of the courtroom, Helena approached Joaquin in the hallway. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for giving us this, for making sure my father's name mattered. He deserved that much. I'm sorry it took 7 years. I'm sorry I tried to kill you." Joaquin almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Attempted murder apologies in a federal courthouse hallway. "We're even," he said. "No, we're not. We'll never be even." Helena's eyes were clear, honest. "But maybe we can both try to be better than we were." "Yeah, maybe we can." They shook hands, killer and victim, wife and husband, 2 people bound by violence trying to find their way back to something resembling human. Then Helena and Diego disappeared into witness protection. New names and new lives waiting somewhere far from Malibu and memories and mistakes. Joaquin walked out of the courthouse alone. The media shouted questions. His lawyers deflected. His security cleared a path to the waiting car. But before he got in, Joaquin looked back at the courthouse, at the marble columns and the American flag and the promise of justice that sometimes, rarely, actually delivered. Roberto Fuentes' name was in the record now. His death investigated. His killer convicted. It wouldn't bring him back. But it was something. It had to be something. Joaquin stood on the same coastal cliffs where Sophie had saved his life, watching the sunset paint the Pacific in golds and crimsons. His hand was steadier now. The tremors had faded to occasional twitches that Dr. Chen said might never fully disappear. Permanent reminders of how close he'd come to death. Battle scars from a war fought with poison instead of bullets. But he was alive. Behind him, he heard footsteps on the pathway, lighter, quicker than adult feet. He turned to see Sophie running toward him in her yellow sweater, Marta following at a more measured pace. "Mr. Lozano," Sophie called out, breathless and smiling. "Mama said you wanted to see us?" "I did." Joaquin knelt down to her level, the same position he'd been in that evening when she'd whispered the truth that saved him. "I have something for you." He pulled out an envelope from his jacket pocket. Sophie took it carefully, her small hands gentle with the expensive paper. "What is it?" "Open it." She did, unfolding the document inside with Marta's help. Her eyes widened as she read or tried to read the legal language. "It's a trust fund," Joaquin explained. "Money set aside specifically for you, for college, for your future, for whatever you want to do with your life. It's yours, Sophie. No one can take it away." Marta's hand flew to her mouth, tears already forming. "Mr. Lozano, this is we can't accept. You already accepted it. The papers are filed." Joaquin's voice was gentle but firm. "Sophie saved my life, Marta. This is the least I can do. It's too much. It's not enough. It will never be enough." He looked at Sophie, at the little girl who'd had more courage than anyone in his organization. You spoke truth when staying silent would have been safer. You saved a life when you could have looked away. That deserves to be rewarded. Sophie was studying the document seriously, her finger tracing the numbers even though she didn't fully understand them yet. Does this mean I can go to college? She asked. Any college you want. Even the fancy ones? Especially the fancy ones. She broke into a smile that rivaled the sunset, pure, genuine, filled with possibility. Thank you, Mr. Lozano. Then, with the impulsiveness of childhood, she hugged him. Joaquin froze for a heartbeat, unused to such uncomplicated affection. Then he wrapped his arms around the little girl who'd saved him, holding on perhaps a moment longer than necessary. When Sophie pulled back, she looked up at him with those observant brown eyes. Are you all better now? All the poison gone? Most of it. The doctors say I'll be okay. Good. I was worried I didn't help enough. You helped exactly enough. You were perfect. Marta was crying openly now, clutching the trust fund documents like they might disappear. Mr. Lozano, I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to thank me. You've served my household faithfully for years. You trusted me with your daughter's safety. This is me returning that trust. He handed Marta a second envelope. This one's for you. Housing deed, the cottage on the east side of the property is yours. Free and clear. No rent, no lease. It's in your name. Security, stability, a home Sophie can grow up in. Marta actually sobbed, her composure finally breaking completely. Why are you doing this? Because Helena was right about one thing. I built an empire without caring about the names of the people my decisions affected. Roberto Fuentes, his family, all the others. Joaquin's voice was quiet but steady. I can't change the past, but I can try to make the future different, starting with making sure the people who matter most are protected. Sophie tugged on his sleeve. Mr. Lozano, can I ask you something? Anything. Are you going to keep being what did Mama call it? A mafia boss? Out of the mouths of children, blunt, honest questions that adults danced around. Joaquin considered his answer carefully. I'm going to be different. My organization is going to be different. More legitimate businesses, less violence, no more unauthorized operations like the one that killed Roberto Fuentes. He met Sophie's eyes. I'm going to try to be better. I can't promise I'll be perfect, but I can promise I'll try. Sophie nodded seriously, as if evaluating his sincerity. Then she smiled. Okay, that's good. Marta collected herself, wiping her eyes. Come on, mija. Let's let Mr. Lozano enjoy his walk. Actually, Joaquin said, would you both walk with me, just for a few minutes? So they did, the three of them walking along the coastal path as the sun sank lower, turning the sky brilliant shades of orange and pink and purple. Sophie chattered about school, about her friends, about the book she was reading. Marta interjected occasionally with gentle corrections or additions. Joaquin listened, asking questions, genuinely interested in the small details of their lives. It was so far removed from his usual world of territory negotiations and profit margins and the careful dance of organized crime. And yet it felt more real than anything he'd experienced in years. When they reached the spot where Sophie had first confronted him, the little girl stopped. This is where I told you, she said, pointing to the exact place. Right here. I remember. Were you scared? When I said Mrs. Helena was poisoning you? Terrified. But you listened anyway, because you were telling the truth. And truth matters, even when it's scary. Sophie considered this with the seriousness of a child processing big concepts. My teacher says telling the truth is always right. But sometimes it feels scary. Being scared doesn't mean you're wrong. Sometimes the most important truths are the scariest ones to speak. Like you testifying about Mr. Raines? Joaquin blinked, surprised. You know about that? Marta looked embarrassed. She saw it on the news. I tried to shield her, but... It's okay. Joaquin knelt down again, meeting Sophie's eyes. Yes, like me testifying. I was scared to do it. Scared of what it would mean for my organization, for my safety. But you taught me that being brave means speaking truth even when you're afraid. I taught you that? Sophie's eyes widened with wonder. You did. You were my teacher, Sophie. And I'm grateful. She threw her arms around him again, squeezing tight. You're welcome, Mr. Lozano. As the sun touched the horizon, Marta and Sophie headed back toward the mansion, their silhouettes growing smaller against the golden light. Joaquin stayed on the cliffs, watching the ocean, feeling the evening breeze, testing the strength in his legs and the steadiness of his hands. He thought about Helena. somewhere far away with a new name and a new life, carrying the weight of what she'd done and what had been done to her family. He thought about Diego, starting over, trying to build something clean from the ruins of revenge. He thought about Dominic Reigns, rotting in a federal prison, finally answering for Roberto Fuentes' death. And he thought about Sophie, 7 years old, brave beyond measure, the little girl who'd refused to stay silent when silence would have been safer. She'd saved his life by speaking truth to power. Now it was his turn to honor that truth by actually changing. Joaquin pulled out his phone and made a call. "It's me. I need you to start restructuring the organization. More legitimate fronts, less street-level operation. I want us out of the drug trade entirely within 2 years. And I want oversight, real oversight, not just loyal yes men. I want people who will tell me when I'm wrong." His lieutenant sputtered. "Boss, that's a complete overhaul." "I know. Do it anyway. The other families won't like it." "I don't care what they like. This is happening." Joaquin's voice was steel wrapped in certainty. "We're changing, or I'm out." He ended the call and stood alone on the cliffs as darkness fell. Power had almost killed him, not just Helena's poison, but the empire he'd built without caring about the names of the people it destroyed. But innocence had saved him. A child's courage. A whispered truth. The bravery to speak when staying silent would have been easier. Joaquin looked back at the mansion, at the lights glowing warm in the gathering darkness, at the home where Marta and Sophie were safe now, protected, given a future better than revenge and violence. The cycle had to break somewhere. Maybe it could break here, with a man who'd learned to kneel not in weakness, but in recognition that sometimes the smallest voices speak the most important truths, and sometimes being saved means learning how to save yourself by becoming someone worth saving. The ocean crashed against the cliffs, the stars emerged one by one, and Joaquin Lozano walked back to his mansion, damaged but alive, changed but hopeful, ready to build something better from the ashes of what he'd been. Thanks for sticking with this story until the very end. You're the reason these stories feel alive. If you're ready for another powerful journey, just tap the next video on your screen. And before you go, leave a quick comment and rate this story from 1 to 10. I'm excited to read your thoughts and connect with you in the comments.